The celebration dinner was extravagant. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables adorned with exotic flowers. Marcus Evans, CEO of Evans Pharmaceuticals, raised his glass to toast his new fiancée, Rebecca, his former executive assistant, whose diamond ring caught every light in the room. Neither noticed Dr. Lillian Chen quietly entering the private dining room, medical file in hand. What confused the other executives wasn't the doctor's unexpected arrival, but her expression as she approached Marcus. Dr. Chen wasn't hesitant or apologetic. She was resolute, with a look that said she was about to change everything, especially for Eleanor Evans, Marcus's chronically ill wife of 15 years, who everyone believed was recovering at home. "To new beginnings," Marcus announced, his voice carrying across the private dining room of the Wellington, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. "And to the woman who has brought light back into my life during this difficult time." Rebecca Taylor beamed, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on Marcus's arm. At 32, she was exactly 19 years his junior, with a kind of polished beauty that came from expensive skincare routines and regular fitness sessions with celebrity trainers. Her dark hair fell in elegant waves around her shoulders, contrasting with the stark white of her designer dress. "I'm so grateful to all of you for your support," Rebecca said, addressing the dozen executives and board members who had gathered to celebrate the engagement. "As Marcus and I begin this journey together, I'm honored to be joining not just his life, but the Evans Pharmaceuticals family as well." The assembled guests nodded appreciatively. They all knew the story, or at least the version Marcus had carefully crafted. Eleanor Evans had fallen ill 18 months ago with a rare autoimmune disorder. As her condition deteriorated, Marcus had hired Rebecca as his executive assistant to help him manage both the company and his personal affairs. Eleanor, too weak to attend company functions, had gradually faded from public view. 6 months ago, Marcus had announced their separation, citing the strain that Eleanor's illness had placed on their marriage. Last month, he had filed for divorce, explaining with practiced sincerity that Eleanor needed to focus on her health, and they had mutually decided to part ways. What most people didn't know was that Eleanor had moved out of their Westlake mansion and into a modest apartment across town, where she lived alone with a part-time caregiver. Or that Marcus had cut her off from their social circle, explaining to friends that visitors exhausted her. Or that the divorce settlement, while appearing generous to outsiders, left Eleanor with just enough to cover her medical expenses, while Marcus retained control of their substantial assets, including her shares in the company her father had founded. Dr. Lillian Chen knew all of this and more as she moved quietly through the room, medical file clutched in her hand. At 45, she was one of the city's most respected immunologists and had been treating Eleanor for over a year. Her practical, bob and simple black pantsuit stood in stark contrast to the evening wear of the other guests. She hadn't been invited to this celebration, but what she carried couldn't wait for a more appropriate moment. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Dr. Chen said, her voice calm but firm as she approached the head table where Marcus and Rebecca sat surrounded by their closest allies. "Mr. Evans, I need to speak with you. It's about Eleanor." Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered, his corporate mask sliding seamlessly back into place. "Dr. Chen, what an unexpected surprise. I'm afraid this isn't the best time. Perhaps we could schedule something for tomorrow." "This can't wait," Dr. Chen replied, her gaze unwavering. "It concerns Eleanor's diagnosis. There have been significant developments." A flicker of annoyance crossed Marcus's face. "Is she all right?" "That depends on your definition of all right, Dr. Chen said. The room had grown quieter, the other guests sensing the tension. Rebecca slid her hand into Marcus's, a territorial gesture that wasn't lost on Dr. Chen. "Darling, perhaps you should step outside for a moment." I'm sure whatever it is can be handled quickly." Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she glanced at the doctor. Marcus nodded, excusing himself with practiced charm. "Please, continue enjoying your meals. I'll just be a moment." Dr. Chen followed him into the restaurant's plush corridor, where crystal sconces cast a warm glow over richly papered walls. When they were out of earshot of the other guests, Marcus's demeanor changed instantly. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, his handsome face contorted with anger. "Do you have any idea what you've just interrupted?" "I'm fully aware, Doctor," Chen replied calmly, "but what I've discovered is more important than your engagement party." "Nothing about Eleanor is more important than my future right now," Marcus said coldly. "We're divorced. Her health problems are no longer my concern beyond what the settlement provides." Dr. Chen's expression hardened. "The divorce isn't final yet, and what I've found changes everything." She opened the file she was carrying. "I've been reviewing Eleanor's test results from the beginning of her illness, comparing them with her recent blood work. I noticed inconsistencies that didn't make sense with her supposed diagnosis." "What are you talking about?" Marcus asked, impatience edging his voice. "I'm talking about the fact that Eleanor doesn't have Stenham syndrome," Dr. Chen said flatly. "She never did." Marcus stared at her, his expression unreadable. "That's impossible. 3 different specialists confirmed. 3 specialists who relied on lab results that I now believe were tampered with," Dr. Chen interrupted. "I had her original samples retested at an independent lab. There's no evidence of the autoantibodies associated with Stenham's. However, there is evidence of something else entirely." Marcus's face paled slightly. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," Dr. Chen replied. "I'm telling you that your wife has been systematically poisoned for at least 18 months. The symptoms mimic Stenham's, but the toxicology report is conclusive." The corridor suddenly seemed very quiet. Marcus stood perfectly still, his breathing shallow. "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a medical finding, Doctor," Chen said, "and I've already reported it to the authorities as I'm legally obligated to do." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I find it interesting that you came here tonight, to my engagement dinner, instead of going directly to Eleanor with this information." "Oh, I've already spoken with Eleanor," Dr. Chen said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "She's with the police now, giving a statement. They're very interested in how poison from your company's own research labs ended up in her system in doses that correlate exactly with the timeline of Rebecca Taylor's employment as your assistant." The blood drained from Marcus's face. "This is absurd. You have no proof that I had anything to do with—" "Actually, we have quite a lot," came a new voice from behind them. Marcus turned to find Detective James Mercer standing at the end of the hallway, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Marcus Evans," the detective said, approaching with measured steps. "We'd like you to come down to the station to answer some questions regarding the attempted murder of Eleanor Evans." As the officers moved forward, the door to the private dining room opened. Rebecca stepped out, concern etched on her perfect features, until she saw the police. Her eyes darted from them to Marcus, then to the exit at the far end of the corridor. "Rebecca Taylor," Detective Mercer called, "we'll need you to come with us as well." The look that passed between Marcus and Rebecca in that moment told Dr. Chen everything she needed to know. As the officers led them away, she thought of Eleanor, sitting in her sterile apartment for months, growing weaker and more confused, believing her body was betraying her, while the husband she trusted was actually orchestrating her slow demise. Dr. Chen had seen many forms of illness in her career, but the calculated cruelty of what Marcus and Rebecca had done made her physically ill. Still, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that Eleanor would finally understand what had happened to her and why. The road to recovery would be long, but at least now it was possible. As Dr. Chen left the restaurant, her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Thank you for believing me when no one else would. That, Dr. Chen thought, was worth more than all. The crystal chandeliers and exotic flowers in Marcus Evans's world. 3 years earlier, the Evans household epitomized success and happiness. Their Westlake mansion regularly hosted the most exclusive gatherings in the pharmaceutical industry. Eleanor Evans stood in their marble-floored foyer, greeting guests. For their annual charity gala, with the grace that had made her one of the city's most admired figures. "Eleanor, you've outdone yourself again," said Catherine Blackwell, chairwoman of the hospital board. "No one throws a fundraiser like you do." At 45, Eleanor radiated effortless elegance. Her blonde hair was styled in a sophisticated updo, complementing her emerald gown and the substantial diamond necklace, Marcus's 15th anniversary gift. "This year, we're hoping to raise $2 million for the children's wing," Eleanor explained. "My father always believed our success meant nothing if we didn't use it to help others." It was a principle Eleanor had carried forward since inheriting Evans Pharmaceuticals from her father when she was 28. Though she had stepped back from day-to-day operations after marrying Marcus, the company's rising star in research, she remained majority shareholder and served as chairwoman of the Evans Foundation, funding medical research globally. There, she is, the woman who makes everything possible, Marcus appeared, handsome in his tailored tuxedo. At 51, he had the confident bearing of a man at his peak, silver-streaked dark hair, strong jaw, and intense focus that had propelled him from researcher to CEO. Their partnership balanced perfectly, Eleanor's vision and compassion paired with Marcus's strategic mind and ambition. His breakthrough work on immunotherapy treatments had revolutionized cancer care and tripled the company's value over the past decade. Later that evening, Eleanor noticed Marcus in deep conversation with a young woman she didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired in a sleek red dress. "Who is Marcus speaking with?" she asked Lillian Chen, a respected immunologist and longtime Foundation collaborator. "I believe that's Rebecca Taylor. She's new to the research division, brilliant biochemist, recruited from Stanford about 6 months ago." Eleanor observed their intense conversation, the way Rebecca leaned forward slightly, her full attention on Marcus as he spoke animatedly. "They seem very engaged," Eleanor noted, feeling a fleeting twinge. "Shop talk, I'm sure," Lillian said with a shrug. "You know how Marcus gets when discussing research possibilities." 2 days later, during a discussion about Project Lazarus, Marcus's most ambitious research initiative, their first real disagreement emerged. "It's time we move forward with human trials," Marcus insisted. "The safety protocols aren't finalized," Eleanor countered gently. "The ethics committee recommended at least another year of testing." "Another year means thousands more patients suffering without options," Marcus argued. "We have a responsibility to move faster. We have a responsibility to do no harm," Eleanor replied. "I trust your science, but we can't rush something this experimental." It was an old disagreement. Marcus pushing boundaries, Eleanor insisting on ethical considerations. Usually, they found middle ground. "I've brought Rebecca Taylor onto the project team," Marcus mentioned. "Her research on cellular regeneration complements our approach perfectly." Weeks passed, and Eleanor noticed Marcus's increasing absences. Late nights at the office, weekend conferences, always with Rebecca's name somewhere in the explanation. Nothing inappropriate exactly, but a growing intimacy that made Eleanor uncomfortable. Then one morning, Eleanor woke with a strange rash spreading across her chest and arms. By the following week, she experienced joint pain and unusual fatigue. A month later, she could barely complete a board meeting without exhaustion overwhelming her. "You need to see a doctor," Marcus insisted. "This isn't normal, Elle." What neither of them yet realized was that her mysterious illness would become the catalyst for revealing the darkness hidden beneath their seemingly perfect life. Eleanor Evans sat in yet another sterile examination room, the thin paper crinkling beneath her as she shifted uncomfortably. In the past 3 months, she had been poked, prodded and tested by 6 different specialists. Today's doctor was a rheumatologist at Metropolitan Medical Center, recommended by Marcus's colleague. "Mrs. Evans, I've examined your test results thoroughly," Dr. Whitman said, his expression serious. "Your symptoms present a complex picture. The persistent rash, joint pain, fatigue, fever, and the recent cognitive issues, along with your elevated inflammatory markers and unusual antibody profile, all point toward an autoimmune disorder." "Which one?" Eleanor asked directly, her business acumen asserting itself despite her exhaustion. "I believe you're suffering from Stenham syndrome," Eleanor frowned. "I've never heard of it. It's relatively rare, only about 300 documented cases worldwide. It's an aggressive autoimmune condition where the body's immune system attacks multiple organ systems simultaneously." "Is there a cure?" Dr. Whitman's expression softened. "Not a cure, no. But we can develop a treatment protocol to manage the symptoms and slow progression." Eleanor listened as he outlined treatments: immunosuppressants, specialized biologics, plasmapheresis. She processed the information with the same focused attention she brought to board meetings, but inside, cold. Dread was spreading. "What's the prognosis?" she finally asked. 5-year survival is approximately 60%, he admitted. "But you have several factors in your favor. We're catching it relatively early, you have access to the best medical care, and you were in excellent health before onset." When she left the doctor's office, Marcus was waiting. For a moment, Eleanor saw genuine concern in his eyes, a glimpse of the man she had married. "What did he say?" "Stenham syndrome. It's an autoimmune disease." "I know what it is," Marcus interrupted, his face paling. "We investigated acquiring a small biotech developing treatments for it last year." Over the next several weeks, Eleanor's health deteriorated with alarming speed. The joint pain became so severe that some mornings she couldn't dress herself. The fatigue was crushing. Worst were the cognitive episodes, moments of confusion, forgotten words, lost trains of thought that left her frightened and frustrated. Marcus arranged for a home health aide, a kind woman named Marie, who helped Eleanor with daily tasks. He converted the downstairs guest room into a bedroom for Eleanor, acknowledging that stairs were becoming too difficult. On the surface, he was the model of a devoted husband, consulting with specialists, researching treatments, ensuring Eleanor had everything she needed. Yet she couldn't help noticing how their actual time together was diminishing. Marcus was working longer hours, claiming the company needed his leadership more than ever. "Rebecca has been invaluable," he told Eleanor one evening over dinner. "She's taken on coordination of the Project Lazarus team while I deal with the board's concerns." Eleanor nodded, trying to ignore her flicker of jealousy. "The project is progressing well, then?" "Remarkably well," Marcus replied, his eyes lighting up. "Rebecca had an insight about the delivery mechanism that might solve our targeting issue. We were in the lab until midnight, testing her theory." 6 months after her diagnosis, Eleanor received a call from Lillian Chen, whom she hadn't seen since her health began declining. "I've been trying to reach you," Lillian said without preamble. "I've been reviewing your case. I noticed inconsistencies in your test results that concern me." "What do you mean?" "It's complicated to explain over the phone. Would it be possible for me to see you in person without Marcus present?" Something in Lillian's tone sent a chill through Eleanor. "He's at a conference in Boston until Thursday. Can you come tomorrow afternoon?" "I'll be there at 2, Lillian confirmed. After hanging up, Eleanor sat for a long time staring at the phone. Why would Lillian need to see her without Marcus? What inconsistencies had she found? For the first time since her diagnosis, Eleanor felt a spark of something other than resignation, a flicker of the analytical mind that had once run a pharmaceutical empire. Chronically, as Eleanor sat in her wheelchair as Detective Mercer briefed her on the emergency board meeting plan. The case against Marcus required irrefutable evidence, his direct incrimination captured on record. "We'll position you in the boardroom wearing a wire," Mercer explained. "The setup is risky, but necessary. Marcus needs to reveal his intentions regarding both your health and Project Lazarus." Eleanor nodded grimly. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the temporary sedative Dr. Chen would administer to mimic advanced neurological symptoms. Marcus expected her to appear significantly deteriorated today. They would give him exactly what he wanted. "I understand the risks," Eleanor said, "but it's worth it to expose what he's done, not just to me, but potentially to my father as well." At noon, Lillian arrived under the guise of a medical checkup. Once alone with Eleanor, she administered a carefully calibrated injection. "This will induce confusion, tremors, and slurred speech for approximately 4 hours," Lillian explained, attaching a discreet transmitter behind Eleanor's ear. "It'll give Marcus exactly what he expects to see, a wife deteriorated enough to be declared incompetent." By 1:30, Eleanor was being wheeled into Evans Pharmaceuticals headquarters through a service entrance. The sedative was working perfectly, creating a genuine fog that made focusing difficult. This wasn't just acting. She was experiencing a controlled version of what Marcus had been inducing in her for months. The board members arrived gradually, each showing shock at Eleanor's condition. James Woodward, her father's oldest friend, knelt beside her wheelchair with undisguised concern. "Eleanor, you don't look well. Perhaps we should postpone—" "No," Eleanor insisted, her words authentically slurred. "Need to be here." When Marcus entered, his momentary surprise at seeing Eleanor quickly transformed into calculated concern. "Eleanor," he exclaimed, "you should be resting at home. This meeting is too stressful in your condition." "My company," she mumbled. "My meeting." Marcus addressed the board with practiced composure, distributing folders containing manipulated medical reports. "These assessments confirm what you can see for yourselves," he said solemnly. "Eleanor's cognitive decline has accelerated dramatically. For both her well-being and the company's stability, I'm proposing implementation of the succession protocol outlined in your materials." Eleanor listened as Marcus methodically made his case for taking control of her voting shares as her medical proxy. The board members reviewed the documents with growing concern for Eleanor's health, exactly as Marcus had planned. When discussion turned to Project Lazarus, Marcus's demeanor subtly shifted, becoming more animated. "With Eleanor's condition, we've delayed the project out of respect for her concerns," he explained. "However, recent breakthroughs make acceleration essential. Our competitors are closing the gap. We could lose billions in market advantage by waiting." Eleanor gathered her strength. "Not safe," she slurred loudly. "More testing needed." Marcus gave the board an apologetic look. "These episodes of fixation are increasingly common. Her doctors have documented this pattern." "Poisoning me," Eleanor managed, her voice stronger. "Using compound EL-217. The boardroom fell silent. Several members looked uncomfortable, believing they were witnessing a paranoid delusion. "This is exactly what I've been explaining," Marcus said smoothly. "These conspiracy theories are symptomatic of her neurological decline." Eleanor deliberately knocked over her water glass. During the momentary confusion, she pressed the signal button for Detective Mercer. The boardroom doors opened. Dr. Chen entered, followed by Detective Mercer and 2 officers. Behind them came Rebecca Taylor, Marcus's assistant and accomplice, her face pale with undisguised fear. Marcus Evans, Detective Mercer announced, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Eleanor Evans. As officers handcuffed a stunned Marcus, Eleanor met his eyes directly. For the first time, she saw him clearly, not the brilliant, caring husband she'd believed in, but the calculating predator he'd always been. Eleanor's private hospital room was quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors. Dr. Chen entered, tablet in hand, her expression more relaxed than it had been in weeks. Your blood work shows remarkable improvement, Lillian reported. The chelation therapy is clearing the DEL217 compound from your system. The MRI shows no permanent neurological damage. At least there's that, Eleanor said quietly. How close was I? Another 2 to 3 months at the increasing dosages Marcus was administering, and the damage would have been irreversible. Lillian sat beside the bed. You were fortunate we caught it when we did. Fortunate, Eleanor repeated with bitter irony. Is that what you call discovering your husband of 15 years has been systematically poisoning you? Before Lillian could respond, Detective Mercer appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. May I come in? I have information you should know. Eleanor gestured to the chair opposite her bed. More bad news? I'm afraid so. Mercer opened a folder containing printed emails. We've been investigating your husband's activities going back several years. These communications between Marcus and Rebecca Taylor began 3 years ago, well before your first symptoms appeared. Eleanor examined the emails dated 2.5 years earlier, discussions about compounds that could mimic neurodegenerative disorders, creating progressive symptoms that would be difficult to detect. This was planned, she whispered, horror washing over her. For years before I ever felt sick. Yes. They began researching possible compounds nearly a year before administering the first dose. Eleanor struggled to comprehend the cold calculation required to plan someone's deterioration over such an extended period. But why? We had everything: success, wealth, respect. Why would he do this? Control of Evans Pharmaceuticals, Mercer said simply. Specifically, control of Project Lazarus. Your insistence on additional safety testing threatened his timeline for what could be a multi-billion-dollar breakthrough. With you declared incompetent, your voting shares would transfer to him as your medical proxy. Eleanor nodded slowly, the pieces clicking into place. Her ethical concerns about Lazarus had intensified approximately 6 months before her first symptoms. The timing aligned perfectly. There's more, Mercer said reluctantly. We've found evidence suggesting this may not have been Marcus's first attempt to remove someone he viewed as an obstacle. What do you mean? Have you heard of Caroline Winters? Eleanor frowned. She was a research assistant in Marcus's lab years ago, died in a car accident. We're reopening the investigation into her death. Preliminary findings suggest her brake lines may have been tampered with. Shortly before her death, she had disputed Marcus's claim to a key breakthrough that later became his most lucrative patent. The patent that had catapulted Marcus to scientific stardom, the achievement that had first drawn Eleanor's attention. At a conference where they'd met, there's also evidence he's been embezzling from the Evans Foundation, Mercer continued. Approximately $30 million diverted to offshore accounts over the past decade. Eleanor closed her eyes, the magnitude of Marcus's deception overwhelming her. The man she had married, the brilliant scientist she had trusted with her father's company, her future, her life, had never truly existed. Was any of it real? She asked softly. That's not something I can answer, Mercer replied gently. But I can tell you that Marcus Evans appears to have viewed relationships merely as means to an end. When that end changed, so did his commitment to those relationships. As Mercer left, Eleanor gazed out the window at the city skyline. The betrayal was almost too vast to comprehend, yet beneath her shock and grief, something else was forming, a cold, clear resolve to reclaim everything Marcus had tried to take from her, Her health, her company, and most importantly, her truth. 2 weeks after Marcus's arrest, Eleanor sat in her hospital room awaiting Rebecca Taylor's arrival. Despite Lillian's concerns, Eleanor had insisted on this meeting. She needed to understand how someone could participate in attempted murder. When Rebecca entered, escorted by a corrections officer, the transformation was striking. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Without cosmetics, in a standard-issue jumpsuit, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and utterly exhausted. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Eleanor said calmly. Rebecca gave a humorless laugh. "I wasn't in a position to refuse. You could have. Your lawyer could have advised against it. What do you want from me?" "Understanding," Eleanor replied simply. "How did he convince you to poison me?" Rebecca gathered her thoughts. "It didn't start that way. We met at a conference in Zurich where I was presenting research. He approached me afterward, said my work aligned perfectly with his project. He was charming, brilliant, attentive. The affair started almost immediately," she continued. "He talked about you, said you were brilliant but overly cautious, holding back revolutionary treatments because of excessive safety concerns. When did the plan to poison me begin?" "Gradually. At first, it was just hypothetical conversations about how the company would be different if he had full control." Rebecca looked down at her hands. "Then he started mentioning symptoms you were having. Headaches, forgetfulness. He suggested it might be early signs of a neurological condition. He created a narrative where you were already ill," Rebecca admitted, "and that we were just accelerating an inevitable process to ensure the company wouldn't suffer during a prolonged decline." "Accelerating an inevitable process," Eleanor repeated coldly. "You mean poisoning me until my brain deteriorated enough for Marcus to take control?" "Yes," Rebecca whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It sounds monstrous saying it plainly. It was monstrous. But Marcus has this way of normalizing the unthinkable." "When did you first administer the compound?" "About 18 months ago. Small doses in your morning coffee. Marcus said it would establish a baseline, create subtle changes attributed to stress or aging." "And the symptoms progressed as planned?" Rebecca nodded. "At first. But then he became impatient. The board wasn't noticing the subtle changes. He wanted to increase the dosages dramatically. That's when I realized he wasn't just trying to ease you out of the company. He was willing to cause permanent damage. Why didn't you stop? Go to the authorities?" "By then I was implicated. My name was on lab requisitions and compound modifications. And Marcus kept files on everyone close to him. Insurance, he called it." Eleanor studied Rebecca, seeing both a criminal accomplice and another of Marcus's victims, though one who had made choices Eleanor never would have. "Did you know about Caroline Winters?" Eleanor asked. Rebecca looked confused. "He mentioned her once, said she died in an accident." "The police believe Marcus caused that accident after she threatened to dispute his claim to a breakthrough." Horror dawned on Rebecca's face. "He talked about her the same way he started talking about you. Brilliant but becoming unstable, a tragedy waiting to happen. Setting the stage," Eleanor said grimly, "creating a narrative that would make her death seem unsurprising." "He would have done the same to me," Rebecca realized, her voice barely audible. As their time ended, Rebecca revealed one final truth. "There's something else you should know about Project Lazarus. The Foundation research, it wasn't Marcus's work. It was your father's from his final project before he died." Eleanor stared in shock. "That's not possible. Dad's last project was deemed unworkable." "That's what Marcus told everyone, but your father had solved the targeting problem. He was months away from a breakthrough when he died. And Marcus buried it," Eleanor whispered, the implications crashing over her, "then recreated it years later as his own discovery. Rebecca nodded solemnly. Project Lazarus isn't just based on your father's work. It is your father's work, with modifications to make it appear original. As guards led Rebecca away, Eleanor sat frozen, this revelation reconfiguring her understanding not just of Marcus's recent betrayal, but of their entire relationship. Had their marriage been built on his determination to steal not just Eleanor's company, but her father's scientific legacy? 3 days after meeting with Rebecca, Eleanor sat with James Woodward and Raj Patel, the company's head of cybersecurity, in her home office. Though still using a wheelchair as she recovered, Eleanor's mind was razor-sharp, focused on uncovering the full extent of Marcus's deception. The password Ms. Taylor provided has given us access to the protected server partition, Raj explained, displaying a directory containing hundreds of innocuously named files on the main screen. "Show me the earliest files," Eleanor directed. Raj navigated to a subfolder dated 16 years ago, shortly after her father's unexpected death. It contained scans of handwritten lab notes in Richard Evans' distinctive script, detailing experiments, observations, and breakthroughs. "My God," Woodward murmured. "Richard was months away from solving the delivery mechanism. These targeting protocols are revolutionary even by today's standards." Eleanor nodded, emotions tightening her throat. When her father died, Marcus, then a promising young researcher, had reported to the board that this approach had proven unworkable despite its theoretical promise. "Compare these to the foundational patents for Project Lazarus," Eleanor instructed. Raj displayed the patent documents filed by Marcus 7 years ago, the breakthrough that had transformed him from respected researcher to scientific superstar. Side by side, the similarity was undeniable. The core mechanisms were identical, with only superficial modifications to disguise the source material. "He stole my father's research," Eleanor said, cold fury building inside her. "Buried it until enough time had passed, then presented it as his own groundbreaking discovery. Not just stole it," Woodward corrected, anger flushing his face. "From these timestamps, he actively suppressed Richard's breakthrough, told everyone it had failed when it was on the verge of success." Eleanor scrolled through more files, the evidence mounting with each document. Email exchanges showed Marcus systematically discrediting her father's approach while simultaneously copying the core research into his private files. "There's more," Raj said, opening another folder. "These files suggest your father wasn't planning to patent the delivery mechanism traditionally. He was developing it as an open-source platform that any research institution could build upon." "That sounds like Dad," Eleanor said softly. "He always believed the most important breakthroughs should benefit humanity broadly, not just shareholders." "It would have revolutionized treatment development," Woodward agreed. "Instead of companies racing to lock down exclusive patents, they could have focused on applications while sharing the core technology. Treatments would have reached patients years sooner at lower costs, which is exactly why Marcus buried it," Eleanor concluded. "An open-source approach wouldn't have made him famous or rich." Another folder contained a detailed dossier on Marcus that revealed Richard had been investigating him for months before his death. Background checks showed discrepancies in Marcus's claimed academic achievements and evidence of research he had taken credit for at previous institutions. Most disturbingly, there were records of 3 separate instances where researchers who had challenged Marcus's methods had suffered career-ending setbacks under suspicious circumstances. "He was a predator long before he came to Evans Pharmaceuticals," Lillian observed, reading over Eleanor's shoulder. "Your father saw the pattern when no one else did, and became his next victim," Eleanor said grimly. The most damning evidence was in the Project Genesis documentation folder, the complete research that would later emerge as Marcus's groundbreaking Project Lazarus. Side by side, the connections were undeniable. Marcus had taken Richard's foundational work, buried it for years while positioning himself to claim ownership, then reintroduced it with just enough modifications to disguise its origin. "This is definitive," Lillian said. "Not just scientific theft and fraud, but a clear pattern establishing motive for murder. Your father was about to expose Marcus, who stood to lose everything. And 16 years later, when I started questioning Project Lazarus's safety protocols, I became the same kind of threat," Eleanor concluded. "So he tried to eliminate me using the same playbook." Eleanor closed the laptop, the weight of these revelations settling heavily. Her 15-year marriage had been built on a foundation of lies. Marcus had courted her, married her, shared her life, all while knowing he had murdered her father and stolen his life's work. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Evans," Detective Mercer said as Eleanor settled into the police station's conference room. "After reviewing the server files you provided, we've made a significant discovery about your father's death." "What have you found?" Eleanor asked, steeling herself. Mercer placed a photocopy of a lab report on the table. "This is a toxicology screening from your father's emergency treatment. This highlighted compound is a vasoconstrictive agent that would have triggered a cardiac event in someone with his heart condition." "You're saying he was poisoned," Eleanor said, her voice hollow. "Yes. This compound metabolizes quickly and mimics stress hormones, which is why it wasn't flagged. But at these levels, with his heart condition, it would have been fatal. And you believe Marcus administered this the night he accessed the lab using my father's credentials. The timeline fits. Your father had scheduled a meeting with the ethics committee where he planned to address concerns about Marcus's research practices." Mercer hesitated. "There's something else. The emergency room doctor who treated your father and ordered this toxicology screening was Dr. Lillian Chen." Eleanor stared in shock. "Lillian? That's impossible. She never mentioned treating my father." "She was a first-year resident at Metropolitan Medical Center the night he was brought in. According to records, she recognized him immediately and insisted on the comprehensive toxicology screening despite the obvious cardiac presentation. And 3 weeks after my father's death, she changed her specialty from emergency medicine to immunology," Eleanor realized, pieces shifting in her mind. "Then 10 years ago, she approached me about funding for her research. I always assumed it was a cold contact. It seems Dr. Chen may have had a more personal connection to your family than she's acknowledged." That evening, Eleanor confronted Lillian in her modest brownstone. "Why did you never tell me you were the emergency doctor who treated my father the night he died?" The color drained from Lillian's face. "I've wanted to tell you for years, but the timing never seemed right." Lillian explained how she'd recognized Richard Evans immediately when he was brought in. The attending diagnosed a heart attack, consistent with his history, but something felt wrong. His symptoms were too textbook. "So you ordered additional tests?" Eleanor prompted. "Yes, but your father deteriorated rapidly. He died before we had the results. And when the toxicology report came back, it showed elevated levels of a vasoconstrictive compound. I brought it to the attending's attention, but he dismissed it as a testing anomaly or contamination." "But you didn't let it go. You changed your specialty to immunology just weeks later." "Your father's work had inspired me since medical school. When I couldn't get anyone to take my concerns seriously, I decided the best way to honor him was to continue the work he had championed. And approaching me for research funding 10 years ago, was that part of this homage?" I had been following Marcus with deep suspicion since your father's death. When he suddenly published breakthrough research in an area Richard had been working on, my suspicions intensified. I needed to get closer to Evans Pharmaceuticals. "So you used me," Eleanor said flatly. "No," Lillian insisted. "Your foundation's goals aligned perfectly with my research. But yes, I also hoped the connection would give me insight into Marcus's work. I never anticipated becoming your friend, Eleanor. That happened organically. And when I became ill? When you discovered Marcus was poisoning me. The pattern was undeniable. But would you have believed me if I had said, I think your husband is poisoning you, and by the way, I suspect he murdered your father 16 years ago? Eleanor had to acknowledge the logic. Such an accusation might have seemed like paranoia. There's something else, Lillian added. Your father came into the ER alone that night. The official report says he was found collapsed in his home office by his housekeeper. But that's not what happened. He drove himself to the hospital. He was conscious when he arrived. Eleanor stared. That's not possible. I was there, Eleanor. He said someone had poisoned him, that he needed specific treatment. And he said one more thing before he lost consciousness. Tell Eleanor to check the hollow book in my study. Marcus can't be trusted with it. Eleanor felt as if the floor had dropped away. He said that? Those exact words? Lillian nodded. I tried to pass the message to you at the hospital, but you were surrounded by people, including Marcus. When I finally approached you alone, you were so shell-shocked with grief that you didn't register what I was saying. We need to go to the house, Eleanor said, rising abruptly. Now! The Evans family estate stood on 5 landscaped acres at the city's edge, a stately Georgian mansion that had been in the family for 3 generations. Eleanor hadn't visited in almost a year, another way Marcus had isolated her under the guise of concern for her health. Mrs. Winters, the long-time housekeeper, greeted them warmly. Miss Eleanor, we've been so worried since the news about Mr. Evans. Are you all right? I'm getting better every day, Eleanor assured her. This is Dr. Chen. We need to look through some of my father's things in his study. Of course, I've kept everything just as it was. Mr. Evans, Marcus, said you wanted your father's study preserved, so nothing's been changed. Eleanor and Lillian exchanged glances. Marcus had wanted the study untouched, but was that out of respect, or had he been unable to find what Richard had hidden? The study was exactly as Eleanor remembered. Dark wood paneling, worn leather chairs, massive oak desk, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lining 3 walls. Where do we start? Lillian asked. There must be thousands of books. Eleanor considered the challenge. He said, the hollow book in my study, not which one specifically. But he must have expected me to know which one he meant. A memory surfaced. When I was 12, Dad gave me a copy of The Secret Garden for my birthday. Inside, he had cut out a hollow space where he hid a locket that had belonged to my mother. She moved to the fiction section. He said, the most important things are often hidden in plain sight, Eleanor. Remember that in science and in life. They found the well-worn hardcover. It felt slightly heavier than it should have, confirming her suspicion. Inside the hollowed-out pages was a small flash drive and a sealed envelope with Eleanor written in her father's distinctive handwriting. He prepared this knowing he was in danger, Eleanor said softly. She carefully opened the envelope and read the letter inside. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then my suspicions about Marcus Evans have proven correct, and I am no longer able to protect you or our company. I've discovered disturbing evidence that Marcus has been falsifying research data, conducting unauthorized trials, and misappropriating company resources. More concerning, I believe he has been deliberately undermining my work on the open-source immunotherapy delivery platform. Yesterday, I found evidence that he attempted to alter my research databases. When confronted, his reaction convinced me he is dangerous, more dangerous than I had imagined. I have backed up all my original research on the enclosed drive, along with documentation of Marcus's ethical violations. I've scheduled a meeting with the board's ethics committee, but I fear Marcus may prevent me from attending. If anything happens to me, do not trust the official explanation. And above all, do not trust Marcus Evans. He is not the dedicated scientist. He appears to be, but a man willing to sacrifice ethics, truth, and possibly lives for his own advancement. The key to understanding lies in Project Genesis, the predecessor to what he may someday call by another name. All the evidence is on this drive, including the original research that I believe he intends to steal. I have always trusted your judgment. Eleanor, you have your mother's compassion and my determination. Trust your instincts about people, even when those instincts contradict apparent evidence. With all my love, Dad. Eleanor read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Her father had known. He had recognized the danger, tried to protect both Eleanor and the company, and it had cost him his life. She handed the letter to Lillian, then turned to the computer kept maintained in her father's study. The flash drive contained several folders: original research, evidence of tampering, Project Genesis documentation, and one labeled simply Marcus. The last folder contained a dossier showing Richard had been investigating Marcus for months. There were discrepancies in claimed academic achievements, evidence of research he'd taken credit for at previous institutions, and records of researchers who had challenged Marcus suffering career-ending setbacks. Most damning was video footage from a hidden camera in Richard's office, showing Marcus slipping something into Richard's drink the night before he died. "This is definitive," Lillian said quietly. "Not just scientific theft, but clear evidence of premeditated murder." Eleanor sat back, overwhelmed by the vindication of her growing suspicions. After 16 years, her father had reached out from beyond death to expose his killer and protect his daughter from the same fate. "We need to take this to Detective Mercer immediately," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. The courtroom fell silent as Eleanor took the witness stand. 4 months had passed since discovering her father's hidden flash drive. 4 months of intensive investigation and legal proceedings. Today was the final day of testimony in Marcus Evans's trial for the murder of Richard Evans, the attempted murder of Eleanor, and a host of fraud charges. Eleanor moved with quiet dignity to the stand, her body mostly recovered, though she still occasionally used a cane. The gallery was packed with reporters, pharmaceutical industry figures, and members of the public captivated by what the media had dubbed the Poison Dynasty case. At the defense table sat Marcus, his once commanding presence diminished by months in detention and the overwhelming evidence against him. Nothing could disguise the hollow look in his eyes as he watched his wife take the stand against him. District Attorney Sophia Reyes approached. "Mrs. Evans, thank you for testifying today. I know these months have been extraordinarily difficult." Eleanor nodded. "Thank you. For the record, could you please describe your relationship to the defendant?" "Marcus Evans is my husband of 15 years, Eleanor replied steadily. "We are currently separated pending divorce proceedings." Reyes guided Eleanor through her testimony, her gradual realization of Marcus's poisoning, the discovery of her father's hidden evidence, and the connections between both crimes. Eleanor's testimony was precise and unemotional, though the gallery reacted with visible shock to some of the more disturbing details. The most compelling evidence came when Reyes played the video recovered from Richard's flash drive. The footage clearly showed Marcus adding something from his pocket to Richard's drink the night before his death. As the video played, a collective gasp arose from the gallery. Marcus's carefully maintained composure slipped momentarily, revealing the calculation beneath. During cross-examination, Marcus's attorney attempted to discredit Eleanor's testimony, suggesting her perceptions had been distorted by her illness and the trauma of recent events. Eleanor remained unshakable, calmly redirecting each question back to the objective evidence. "Mrs. Evans, the defense attorney asked. "Isn't it possible that your current perspective on your marriage has been influenced by the suggestions of those around you during your recovery?" "No," Eleanor replied firmly. "The evidence is objective and conclusive. The compound in my system matches formulations developed under Project Lazarus. Rebecca Taylor has testified to preparing these compounds at Marcus's direction. The email exchanges and recorded conversations demonstrate clear intent. These are documented facts, not interpretations." After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. "On the count of first-degree murder in the death of Richard Evans, we find the defendant guilty." A murmur ran through the gallery, quickly silenced by the judge. "On the count of attempted murder of Eleanor Evans, we find the defendant guilty." One by one, the forewoman read the verdicts. Guilty on all 27 charges. Marcus showed no visible reaction, his face a mask of controlled indifference. Only when the judge scheduled sentencing for the following month did a flicker of calculation cross his features. Outside the courthouse, District Attorney Reyes held a brief press conference. "Today's verdict represents justice not just for the Evans family, but for all who believe that scientific progress must be guided by ethical principles," she stated. "Marcus Evans' crimes struck at the very heart of our medical research system. This case sends a clear message that no one, regardless of position or prestige, is above the law." That evening, Eleanor sat alone in the garden of her childhood home, where she had been living since her recovery. The verdict had brought a sense of closure, but not the emotional catharsis she had perhaps expected. Marcus's conviction couldn't undo the years of deception or bring her father back. It couldn't erase the knowledge that the man she had loved had never truly existed. Yet there was peace in knowing the truth had finally emerged. Richard Evans's brilliance and ethical vision would now be recognized. His breakthrough would help countless patients, as he had intended, and Marcus would spend the rest of his life in prison, his carefully constructed false identity stripped away, his true nature exposed to the world. 6 months after Marcus's sentencing to life imprisonment, Eleanor stood at the podium of the International Medical Innovation Conference, poised to transform the pharmaceutical landscape. As chairwoman of Evans Pharmaceuticals, she had returned to active leadership, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. "For decades," she began, "medical innovation has been driven by a model that prioritizes proprietary control over collaborative progress. Today, Evans Pharmaceuticals is introducing a paradigm shift that my father, Richard Evans, envisioned 16 years ago before his untimely death." In the front row, Lillian Chen sat beside James Woodward, both offering encouraging smiles. The Evans Open Platform Initiative will make our breakthrough delivery technology available to research institutions worldwide without restrictive licensing fees or exclusive patents. Instead of monopolizing this technology, we are creating an ecosystem where researchers can build upon a common foundation, accelerating treatments for conditions ranging from autoimmune disorders to rare genetic diseases. A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. In an industry built on patents and proprietary advantages, this approach was revolutionary. "Some will question whether this makes sound business sense," Eleanor acknowledged. "To them, I say, Evans Pharmaceuticals isn't changing our business model. We're returning to our founding principles. My father built this company on the belief that profit should follow purpose, not drive it." She outlined the specifics: a comprehensive support infrastructure, specialized applications Evans would continue to develop, and the Richard Evans Foundation to fund research at institutions adopting the open platform. Instead of controlling the technology itself, Evans would become the leader in implementation, expertise, and quality assurance. The response was enthusiastic. medical researchers recognize the potential for breakthrough acceleration. Healthcare. Advocates saw the possibility for more affordable treatments. Even industry competitors seemed intrigued by the bold strategic pivot. After the announcement, Eleanor was approached by Dr. Nina Sharma from the Kimball Institute. Your announcement today means more than you might realize for researchers like me, Dr. Sharma said earnestly. I've been working on a treatment for a rare neurological condition that affects fewer than 5,000 people worldwide. With traditional development models, it's simply not commercially viable. But with an open platform approach, smaller teams like mine could potentially bring solutions to market without the prohibitive licensing fees. Eleanor was touched by this concrete example of how her father's vision could impact real patients. She arranged for Dr. Sharma to visit Evans' research facilities for a more in-depth collaboration. The conference was productive, with Eleanor establishing relationships with research institutions and even competing pharmaceutical companies interested in the open platform framework. Weeks later, during a visit to the research campus, Eleanor encountered Dr. Martin Green, a neurologist who had recently joined Evans Pharmaceuticals. Mrs. Evans, Dr. Green greeted her. We've made some intriguing discoveries applying your father's targeting mechanism to the blood-brain barrier challenge. We may have solved the delivery problem for certain neurodegenerative conditions. That's remarkable progress in such a short time, Eleanor commented. Actually, we had a significant head start, Dr. Green admitted. When your team shared the original research files, we discovered your father had already theorized this approach. We're essentially building on conceptual groundwork he laid 16 years ago. He seems to have anticipated challenges we're only now fully understanding. Indeed, there's one particular application where his insight was truly visionary. He specifically mentioned its potential for treating early-onset CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which wasn't even well documented in the scientific literature of that time. This detail caught Eleanor's attention. CTE specifically. That's an unusual focus for that era. Precisely what makes it so remarkable, Dr. Green confirmed. He referenced applications for contact sport injuries leading to progressive cognitive decline, essentially describing CTE before it had been fully characterized. Eleanor frowned. Her father hadn't been particularly interested in sports medicine. Why would he have highlighted this application? Following her intuition, Eleanor began reviewing more of her father's personal files. She found calendar entries showing regular appointments with Dr. Thomas Bailey, a neurologist specializing in traumatic brain injuries. These appointments appeared on Richard's personal calendar rather than his medical calendar. She discovered Dr. Bailey had been a pioneering researcher in sports-related brain injuries, particularly those suffered by football players, work that had preceded the broader recognition of CTE. Why would her father have been consulting with such a specialist? Richard hadn't been an athlete. She contacted James Woodward, who had been Richard's closest friend. James, did my father ever mention an interest in sports medicine or brain injuries from contact sports? There was a long pause. Why do you ask? I found research notes where he specifically highlighted potential applications for treating CTE, along with calendar entries showing meetings with Dr. Thomas Bailey. Another pause, then Woodward sighed. I was wondering if this might come up eventually. Your father asked me not to discuss it, but given everything that's happened, perhaps you should know. Your father had a son from his brief first marriage, Woodward explained gently. Michael would be about 45 now. Eleanor stared at the phone in shock. I have a brother? Half-brother, technically. From your father's marriage long before he met your mother. His ex-wife moved across the country with their son, remarried, and the boy was adopted by his stepfather. Richard respected their wishes for a clean break, though he quietly kept tabs on Michael over the years. And the connection to brain injuries? Michael, played college football, then briefly professionally. He suffered multiple concussions. When symptoms of cognitive decline began appearing in his 30s, Richard recognized the pattern from emerging research on CTE. He consulted with Dr. Bailey and began focusing some of his research on potential treatments, hoping to develop something that might help his son. Eleanor sat in stunned silence. "Does Michael know any of this? About Dad's efforts or about me?" "I believe Richard may have reached out when the research showed promise. But then Marcus murdered him," Eleanor finished grimly, "and any connection was lost." After extensive research, Eleanor located Michael Lassiter, his stepfather's surname, in Portland, Oregon, where he worked as a high school athletic director. Social media showed a lean, serious-looking man with Richard's distinctive eyes, surrounded by a wife and 2 teenage children. Eleanor studied these images, searching for resemblances to her father. This was her brother, a stranger who shared her blood, who might not even know of their connection. After days of consideration, Eleanor wrote to Michael, explaining their connection and her discoveries about their father's research. She offered information about the emerging treatments based on Richard's work, but made no presumptions about his interest in establishing a relationship. 3 weeks later, a response arrived, a handwritten letter with familiar, precise handwriting that so resembled her father's it brought tears to her eyes. Michael wrote that he had indeed known about Eleanor's existence, as Richard had reached out to him shortly before his death. They had met twice, and Richard had spoken proudly of his daughter, who was carrying on his pharmaceutical legacy. After Richard's death, Michael had considered contacting Eleanor, but ultimately decided against disrupting her life, especially after learning of her marriage to the man who had taken her father's place at the company. Most surprisingly, Michael revealed that Richard had shared his concerns about Marcus Evans during their final meeting. Dad said he didn't trust the man who was positioning himself to take over both his company and his daughter's affections, Michael wrote. He feared Evans was dangerous, though he didn't elaborate. Now I understand why. Michael was receptive to learning more about the treatment protocols derived from their father's research. His symptoms, while manageable currently, were progressing. He also expressed interest in meeting Eleanor, suggesting she might visit Portland when she felt ready. As Eleanor finished reading the letter, she felt something shift within her, a sense of family reconnection that Marcus had inadvertently made possible through his own downfall. The brother she never knew had been there all along, another piece of her father's legacy waiting to be rediscovered. 1 month later, Eleanor stood on the porch of a comfortable suburban home in Portland, nervously straightening her jacket before ringing the doorbell. The door opened to reveal Michael Lassiter, their father's eyes looking back at her from a face that somehow seemed instantly familiar. "Eleanor," he said, his voice warm with emotion. "I've waited a long time to meet you." "Michael," she replied, smiling through tears. "So have I." As they embraced, Eleanor felt the final piece of her healing fall into place. Marcus had taken so much, her father, years of her life, trust in her own judgment, but he hadn't been able to erase all connections to the past. Some bonds, like the one she was now forming with her brother, were beyond his reach. From the depths of betrayal had emerged a new beginning, one built not on deception, but on truth, not on proprietary control, but on open collaboration, not on isolation, but on family reconnection. Her father's vision was being realized both scientifically and personally in ways neither Marcus nor Eleanor herself could have anticipated. As she stepped into Michael's home to meet his family, Eleanor knew that the next chapter of her life would be written entirely on her own terms.